Good afternoon, Tuscaloosa, Internet world, right here in West Alabama, downtown Northport. This is the Joe Gaither Show right here on BamaCentral and BamaCentral.com. We are a proud part of the BamaCentral Broadcasting Network. We want to encourage you to subscribe to our other BamaCentral Broadcasting Network podcasts, Blue Collar Unplugged, with our friends Matthew Gibson, Blake Byler, and Jacob Pickle. Those guys bringing you all things Alabama basketball, as the basketball team hit a little bit of a slide over the last week or so, lost 2 out of the last 3. So make sure you check out Blue Collar Unplugged for all those guys' updates on the Alabama basketball team. We're not going to talk basketball today. We haven't really talked a whole lot of basketball on the show this week, despite the loss in the ACC SEC Challenge to Clemson. It's a huge week on the football field. Goodness gracious, it's SEC Championship week, and we have had a lot of fun talking to several different guests already this week, and we're going to keep it rolling by talking to Patrick Garbin of UGASports.com, one of the Rivals affiliates, Pro Football Writers of America member as well. Patrick joins us right after we both listened to Kirby Smart and Nick Saban talk the little SEC Championship press conference today. Patrick, how's your afternoon? Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, yeah. Everything's going great. How you doing, Joe?
Oh, not too bad. I'm excited about this weekend. Pumped up. Alabama and Georgia, 3 o'clock on CBS, the last SEC on CBS game. A Georgia 6.5, 7-point favorite, rising by the minute. So let's just start with something that I've been curious about this week, Patrick. How much do you think the 2021 series, the SEC championship game and the national championship game, the win and the loss for Alabama, how much do you think those two games are maybe lingering over this weekend's affair?
I can just speak from what I think about Georgia, but as far as Georgia and their coaching staff, I mean, like Kirby Smart said at the beginning of the week, only a few guys are still around from, say, that 2021 team. And those that are around didn't see a lot of significant action necessarily back then. Plus, this program, since Smart's been there beginning in 2016, they do a good job of moving on, going game by game and not really thinking about last year, next year, very much it's a 1 week at a time type mentality. So I honestly don't think that it really enters Georgia's mind much.
We're talking to Patrick Garbin of UGASports.com. You can follow him on Twitter at Patrick Garbin, or X if you'd rather call it X. Georgia coming in with a 29-game winning streak. How much, I guess this is a silly question, but how much pressure do you think kind of does that win streak hang over the Georgia program? You just kind of alluded to the week-to-week mindset. Do you think that because that mindset is so strong that they don't really care that, hey, we're riding a pretty historic streak?
I'll say that again, at least what we hear, these players are very much like they don't think of, the team from a couple years ago, which began the streak, and they just are truly focused on the here and the now. But Joe, let's be honest. I mean, 29 games in a row. I mean, you can, I think, count on. I mean, I know it's only happened so often in the history of college football, and these kids, they got to hear some of that. So I don't know, but if there is a team that doesn't let any of the outside pressure, I guess, allow to creep in, Georgia does a good job of keeping that out.
Well, let's talk about one of the differences from this year's Georgia team from the last 2 years is Mike Bobo, who came in to be the new offensive coordinator after Todd Monken went to the Ravens. Yeah, went to the Ravens. So Mike Bobo has come in, and I have many Georgia circles, and it's been mixed bags of the reception of Mike Bobo. So how do you think Mike Bobo has developed in his role as offensive coordinator?
And I think at first there was there was some attitude from fans, especially if the Georgia offense was kind of sluggish, which at times at the beginning of the year it was. But I think as the season has gone on and Georgia, they're averaging roughly 40 points and 500 or close to 500 yards a game. You really can't knock that. I mean, the offense has been fine. Mike's been a great offensive coordinator. He was a good offensive coordinator when he was here from, up through 2014, I think. Yeah, I think for the most part, all those rumblings, if you will, have calmed down.
What makes Carson Beck special? Obviously, sitting on the bench waiting his turn, he steps in and doesn't miss a beat. So, what makes Carson Beck special as the Georgia starting quarterback?
I think just his ability. I think he has a way of surgically, if given time, and that's going to be a key in Saturday's game, but given time, he can surgically pick apart a defense like I've seen few quarterbacks can do if given time. And he does have skilled position players. Let's just so he's armed, if you will. So yeah, I think that makes him different, but also he's developed this season. I mean, I think he's a much different quarterback than, say, the first half of Auburn, when maybe he was rattled a little bit and he was playing on the road. But since then, he has, whether at Tennessee, at Georgia Tech last week, which is essentially a home game for Georgia anyway, but he just is calm and collective. And I think he has probably surprised a lot of Georgia fans. I mean, Georgia fans should always feel nowadays that their quarterback play should be at least somewhat stable. But I think even Beck has surprised many this year.
Well, what is it about Carson Beck that really, has allowed him? Look, Georgia's had a lot of moving parts this year. You get a new offensive coordinator. You've had players go in and out of the lineup due to injury issues. But Carson Beck has seemingly just kept the ship steering right on track. And so what is it about maybe his mental makeup, or is there anything about him, his character, that says, you know what, it doesn't matter what the adversity that he's being dealt with, he's just able to rise above and lead Georgia to where they want to go?
And Joe, you make a good point. Speaking of adversity, he's been here since the 2020 season, and he sat behind a lot of quarterbacks. And then even early on the 2021 season, it was looking like he was going to be the starter after JT Daniels went down, but he apparently couldn't handle that starting role in the couple practices there. And that's when Stetson Bennett came in, and the rest is history. This year, Carson finally got his chance after 3 years of kind of waiting his turn. And obviously he matured during that time. And he came in with experience. I mean, he came in having thrown for like 600 or so career yards, and he just was able to pick it right up and run with it.
Well, let's talk about some of his skill position players. Let's start with the running backs with Dajon Edwards and Kendall Milton. Maybe not the superstar level Nick Chubb, DeAndre Swift type, but if you could for us, compare the two running backs, or either of the two running backs, to maybe some Georgia running backs in the last 10 years that we've seen really go from Athens into the league and dominate.
Yeah, well, I tell you, they're Dajon Edwards has he was kind of the steady running back for most of the year, including during the time when Georgia for several games had a hard time establishing the run. But here in the last 3 games, Kendall Milton's averaged, it's around 115 yards rushing a game or so, and I think 8.5 yards a carry, and has scored 4 or 5 touchdowns. So he has kind of established himself just in the last few weeks as the man. As far as a comparison, Joe, you threw me a hard one there.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, of any of these guys that gone into the pros, I don't know. I mean, Kendall Milton has some maybe some shift that DeAndre Swift has. That might be my best. They're all very unique. Let's just say that.
Perfect. Well, Georgia's coming into Saturday with maybe a little bit of question marks for injuries. Say Kirby Smart just touched on it at his press conference. Brock Bowers, Ra Thomas, Ladd McConkey, and Tate Ratledge all kind of dealing with varying injuries. Obviously, Coach Smart was playing it close to the vest. I don't know who's going to be available quite yet. Today's practice going to be very important. What's your take on the guys' availability? Many of them, I think all of them, didn't play last week against Georgia Tech. What's going to be the Georgia maybe injury status going into Saturday?
I think you can count on Brock Bowers playing. In fact, I know what Kirby said about, hey, these guys weren't ready and all that, but I think Brock Bowers, if he really, let's say, had to play against Georgia Tech, he probably could have. Tate Ratledge might have been right there too, as far as guys that could have played but didn't. But I'm expecting him to play. Ra and Ladd McConkey, as you said, two of the more talented receivers, Georgia. Those two are more up in the air, especially I would think Ladd, he's iffy, but if I was a predicting man on both those receivers, I don't think they play.
We're talking to Patrick Garbin of UGA Sports, part of the Rivals Network, and you can follow him at Patrick Garbin on the X/Twitter machine. All right, one big narrative about the Georgia team this year is terrible schedule. They haven't been challenged, XYZ, blah, 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 weak schedule, cupcakes. How has this schedule prepared the Georgia Bulldogs for what they'll see on Saturday?
I think, and it's funny because, I'll admit I was one of those also, that I say you got Missouri and then Ole Miss at home. I mean, maybe one of those is competitive, and then but they wound up playing the 12th, 9th, and 18th ranked teams in consecutive weeks prior to Georgia Tech. So a simple answer, I think that kind of gauntlet has helped prepare them. I will say, though, this Alabama defense that they're facing Saturday is the first defense ranked higher than 40th currently in the FBS that Georgia's faced this year. In other words, this is not only probably or very likely the best defense they've faced, but maybe by far. So that's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, that's kind of what I want to kind of lean into just a little bit with Carson Beck. Everything that he's basically handled the year pretty flawlessly, but this will objectively be his toughest task. What do you know about him, or what have you seen maybe in particular moments, in isolated moments, either in the facility or in games, that says that he's going to be ready for this challenge? He's going to be ready to play against a top-level defense.
Yeah, he's just from what he's demonstrated, even in interviews, he's just very calm, collective, and even you watch him in the pocket, he stays very calm and collected. I will say there's a reason, though, he stays calm and collected.
He's protected pretty well.
He rarely gets touched. I mean, he's only been sacked 9 times this year, and he's dropped back to pass close to 400 times. I mean, that's pretty good. So that's going to be a key. I mean, if Bama can bring pressure, it's just no one really has all year. So we haven't seen that really yet. So, but if there's a team that can bring it, it's Alabama.
Georgia played close games with Missouri and Auburn, and one particular common thread for both offenses was Peyton Thorne and Brady Cook moving and running, getting in quarterback runs, whether it was called quarterback runs or scrambles in the passing game. What's the concern level with Jalen Milroe being able to utilize his legs to get after the Georgia defense?
There's concern. I think there's a lot of concern. In fact, just although it's a little bit of apples and oranges, because I think Jalen more so extends plays instead of being like a running quarterback. He extends plays and gets a lot of yardage. That has hurt Georgia this year, and also just Georgia's run defense on the whole. Joe, 4 years leading into this year, Georgia averaged allowing only 2.6 yards per attempt. And nobody even reached 2.9. No season Georgia allowed 2.9 or higher. This year Georgia's averaging 4 yards a carry, which is, if you would have told me that back in August, I wouldn't have believed it. Especially here, they're undefeated. So they've been vulnerable to that run, and especially to quarterback runs where the quarterback's just trying to extend a play, and next thing you know, he's taking off running for 10, 15, 30 yards. So that could be an issue for Georgia.
Many people that I talk to say, oh, well, Georgia just needs to put a spy on him and they'll be fine. Put a spy on him. You've seen that strategy throughout the Alabama season with varying levels of success. If Georgia were to take that route, would it be Jermon Dumas-Johnson? Would it be maybe C.J. Allen? Who would be that guy that you say, this is Georgia's best athlete on defense in the open field? They've got the best shot to take down Jalen Milroe.
Yeah, that's a real good question. Dumas Johnson's hasn't been healthy lately, and he's pretty much week to week. I mean, if there was a spy, it may be Smile Munden, a veteran linebacker. But Kirby Smart was asked more or less about spying and whatnot earlier in the week. Yeah, and he, as expected, he basically just it came off as like there's no such thing as really a spy. So I don't know, spying or not spying, Georgia's going to have to contain him. I mean, just Milroe and the entire running game, I think is key. I mean, if Alabama can establish any type of running game, I think Georgia could be in trouble.
Let me ask you about the flip side. Two Alabama guys who have Georgia ties, Jermaine Burton and Tresman Marshall. Jermaine Burton been in Tuscaloosa the last 2 years. Tresman Marshall, this is his first year in Tuscaloosa from the transfer portal. What was the Athens response to losing both those guys? Obviously, most of my listeners have a familiarity with Jermaine Burton and Trez Marshall after watching them this year and last year. Jermaine Burton, kind of enigmatic, very good player, but he's very very effusive with his emotions. Trez Marshall has been a good little player so far. What was really the Georgia attitude seeing those two guys go into the transfer portal, and then I guess subsequently seeing them go to Alabama?
Yeah, I mean, there's like with a lot of fans bases, Joe. There's various,
fans are fans.
Opinions. I mean, there's some people that can't believe you'd leave Georgia, but I think for the most part, people understand that these kids, they want to play, and like A.D. Mitchell is a receiver, a fine receiver at Georgia, who would have been a certainly top target this year. He goes to Texas because he knows at Texas he could probably be the top target at Texas. So these kids want to go. They want to go where they want to play. And I think most fans, they understand that. I mean, even if you do go to Alabama, if that's where you think you can play more than and Kirby certainly has this attitude too. And I think that's why he has such a good relationship with these kids, even if they go to another school. And that's why a lot of times they'll come back, if they're from the state or whatnot. He has a good way of doing that. And it's because that relationship that he has with them, and that's even a strong relationship if they decide to go somewhere else. With the transfer portal nowadays, things can change. And I think most people's, at least here in Georgia, their attitude is, just go where you think you can play.
Huge implications this weekend with the SEC championship, and obviously just right inside the conference, the SEC championship means a whole lot. But this weekend's going to be wild when you think about college football playoff. What's the Georgia feel? I got a lot of Georgia fan friends who are saying, we should be in even if we lose. And then you've got, a lot of anti-Alabama friends of mine. Y'all shouldn't even be in if Alabama wins. The winner should be in the playoff, correct, Patrick?
Of the SEC,
right? Yeah, whether it's Georgia or Alabama, Georgia undoubtedly you'll be 13-0. You'll be number one undoubtedly. Sure. But even if Georgia, could Alabama make the leap from 8 to 4, and then I guess the other possibility, if Georgia loses, could they stay in the top 4?
I think these teams right now are certainly 2 of the top 4 teams. In fact, you could argue that they might be the 2 top teams in the country. After this game, even with a Georgia loss, I think they are still one of the top 4 teams. And I think that's the prevailing attitude. However, you look at the rankings and you're like, how would this work though? I mean, Georgia would need even a loss, although Georgia is probably deserving and probably the top 4 teams. If the certain teams win, on Friday and Saturday, Georgia could find themselves looking on the outside looking in when they probably deserve to be there.
Would you say there's any chance that Alabama wins and both teams, there's no SEC representation, both teams are left out of the playoff?
Again, if you look at those teams, you could see how maybe that could work, but I'll be honest, I couldn't imagine the playoff committee leaving an SEC team. Like if an SEC team had 2 losses and 2 losses or more, I get it. But Georgia with 1 loss, Bama with 1 loss, I cannot see how the SEC wouldn't have at least one SEC team, or excuse me, the playoff committee have an SEC team in their top 4.
Well, Sunday's going to be wild, and we'll have to see how it plays out after the Saturday game. Well, just one or two more questions, of course, with Patrick Garbin of UGAsports.com, part of the Rivals Network. Tell us about Brock Bowers. I mean, everybody knows Brock Bowers. You had the preseason tight end. Tight ends can't win a Heisman Trophy. He might be the best player in America. I've been telling all my Chicago Bear friends that we need to draft him in the top 10 this coming up year. He's incredible, but then he obviously has the ankle injury, takes the surgery, missed the week last week. What's his effectiveness? At least on the field? And what do you maybe like about him? What have you learned about him over the last 3 years that you think people don't know about Brock Bowers?
I mean, I can tell you that, I know a good bit about UGA football history, and I can tell you, I honestly think he is, so even at the time of his injury, so just through 2.5 years, one of the top 5 Georgia football players of all, certainly top 10, but you could argue top 5. He is just that outstanding of a player. He just from catching passes to running reverses. I swear, if he needed to play quarterback, he probably could. He gives 110%. He's a future first-round draft pick. He works his tail off at everything. That's a reason why it shows you how he came back from that tightrope surgery in just 26 days to play. I think that's the impact he's made. He's that important of a player. I will say, though, Georgia, they haven't necessarily had to need him, though, often. When you're
pretty good too.
Yeah, when you're beating everybody by so much. However, he can be that difference. He can be that difference maker, and especially in a game like this when it's likely going to be close and be a 4th quarter game. Brock can make that difference, and I think he's healthy enough, surely, to make that difference. And as I mentioned, he's going to play. I mean, there's no doubt about it. So, I mean, will he have 150 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns? I mean, I don't know if he's can make that much of an impact, especially against an opponent like Alabama and that pass defense. However, if Georgia wins, it wouldn't be surprise me if Brock is one of their top 2 or 3 players for the game.
All right, so you've tempted my brain here. You said top 5, certainly top 10. What are your top 5 Georgia players ever? Not scientific. Obviously, you haven't written it all down, but just
you had to ask me, didn't you? How much time we got?
As much time as you want. And honestly, I'm doing this for selfish reasons. My parents are 1983 graduates of UGA, so I grew up on Georgia football. And so I know my dad would say, why didn't you ask him his top 5 as soon as as I finished?
Open
the floor. I got plenty. I got all night.
Okay.
You don't.
Well, you said both your parents graduated in 83?
83 or 84. Yes, they were
Okay.
freshmen in 80. Yes.
Okay. Then they'd be very familiar with number one. That's Herschel Walker.
Easily.
And I won't go into all the reasons. I could,
Sure.
but number one and arguably the number one college football player of all time.
Certainly.
Also up there, you have to include Frank Sinkwich, who won the 1942 Heisman Trophy. Charlie Trippi certainly has needs some recognition. He was the runner-up to the 1946 Heisman and won the Maxwell Award in 1946. I would say, is Georgia's most versatile player of all time. Herschel's the most outstanding. The most valuable, I would say, is Bob McWhorter, a halfback from 1910 through 1913. And I could tell you why he was more valuable than anyone else. You got to consider Stetson Bennett, Georgia's quarterback, and primarily because how he was able to quarterback Georgia to back-to-back national titles, was a Heisman finalist that final year. And I tell you, and then, and I don't have any defensive guys in there yet. That's the thing, Georgia, when it's interesting you say that, because when people bring up Georgia's Mount Rushmore, it's all over the place. It includes guys that I just brought in and maybe some others. But if you had to throw a defensive guy in there, maybe David Pollock, who's Georgia's only other three-time first-team All-American besides Herschel. And, you're talking about some guys like Bill Stanfield, Jake Scott, and then Brock Bowers. You got to start including him in there at some point. So I gave you a good bit there, Joe.
Plenty. Perfect. Love it.
But yeah, I think you definitely have to start with Herschel. And then after that, it's a log jam of, say, 2 through 8.
Let me ask you about something that one of those players you just mentioned, David Pollock, said day before. He said that going into this game, Kirby Smart is the better coach. Kirby Smart has the coaching advantage over Nick Saban. Agree or disagree, or you want to dissect that comment real quick?
I don't know if as far as coaching advantage, I don't know if I would say, like, just by pure coaching, if how anyone could say that, really. I mean, that's kind of hard to think, come up with. I think I think I'll be honest with you. I think both are legendary coaches, and if I had to start a college football team, I may go with Kirby just because he's the younger. Saban was the mentor, and I may want to go with the younger pupil who's turning into a mentor himself than someone who may be retiring here in a few years. So that'd be the one edge I think that Kirby has over Nick.
How do you explain the laser focus that Kirby still has after winning 29 games in a row, back-to-back national championships? I think that he really still looks himself in the mirror and thinks, nobody believes in me. Nobody believes in us. We're going out to prove it again today. And then they just go do that. And how do you explain? Because even Coach Saban, as much as I admire him and respect him, and we enjoy covering him right here at BamaCentral.com, I don't know that he has that laser desperation, at least the way that Kirby shows it day in and day out.
Yeah, and from day one at his opening press conference when he said, quote, "There'll be no comfortable." And that's truly how it is over there. I mean, you go over and you hang out over there at the Butts-Mehre building, and it's a different mindset from a lot of people over there than, say, compared 10 years ago. There's no complacency. There's no comfortable. Like I said, it's a week-to-week type mentality. And Kirby also always stresses that humility is just a week away. And when you drill this into your players and your staff over and over, I can see why there's this no complacency type attitude, and it's almost like everyone's on their toes and ready for that next game.
All right, so just two more for us. We're talking to Patrick Garbin of UGAsports.com. If you are the Alabama coach, head coach Patrick Garbin, what are you trying to do this weekend to take down the Big Bad Bulldogs?
On offense, I'm establishing a running game because I'll be honest, I don't know if my quarterback, Jalen Milroe, is going to have much success against one of the best pass defenses in the country. I think we can have some run success, however. And then on defense, it's going to be a tall task, but we're going to have to pressure Carson Beck. We're going to have to get to him, and he's only gone down 9 times. I'm thinking we're going to need at least 3 sacks, though, of them.
Well, Patrick, I really appreciate your time and hanging out with us right here on Thursday, getting ready for the SEC Championship. Anything that we've left off the table or things that people need to be aware of or things that you're looking for this weekend's SEC Championship game, Alabama and Georgia, 3 o'clock, Mercedes-Benz Stadium?
Yeah, one thing I did notice is, these programs continue to kind of mirror one another, not necessarily offensive uses and defenses, but there's still this, they still continue to be successful. And if you look at the latest recruiting rankings, and I'm talking 2025, our rivals recruiting rankings, and granted, no one has many commitments yet for 2025, but there sits Georgia and Alabama, first and second, each with 8 commitments already for the 2025 class. So I guess my point is, these programs, they're interesting. They're meeting here for what some say is kind of a national title game in itself. And here the rich keeps getting richer because they continue to recruit. And we're going to see this matchup in similar circumstances going forward down the road. This is going to be one of, and it's been one, but it's going to keep going.
Well, I'm really looking forward to it Saturday at 3 o'clock right there on CBS. Follow Patrick Garbin at Patrick Garbin and at UGAsports.com. Patrick, tell everybody or anything else you'd like to tell the people, but thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Oh, yeah. For complete coverage of Georgia Bulldogs, please visit UGAsports.com. And, Joe, I appreciate you having me on, man.
No problem. I hope to meet you on Saturday. That'll be great.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. That's Patrick Garbin joining us tonight on the Joe Gaither Show right here on BamaCentral and BamaCentral.com. Oh, I say tonight. It's really only 4:30. It says it feels like midnight outside with the time change, but I'm very, very grateful. Patrick joining us today to get us ready for Alabama and Georgia on Saturday, SEC Championship. So, look, tomorrow is going to be Football Friday. We'll have Katie Wyndham and Austin Hannon joining us at least. We'll find out if any of the other BamaCentral crew will join us to talk all kinds of championship games. Oh, my gosh, we have talked ad nauseum. I don't know if there's any weaknesses on this Georgia team. I've watched them play Auburn. I watched them play Missouri. I watched them play Ole Miss. I watched them against Ball State. I watched a lot of Georgia tape. I'm going to continue to watch it through the evening and in the morning, before we do Football Friday, as I make my prediction tomorrow on the show. So we had a lot of fun this week. We've talked to Patrick Garbin. We've talked to Anthony Dasher, both of UGAsports.com. We had a lot of fun talking to those guys, picking their brains, getting ready for the weekend. And it's about to be upon us, Saturday at 3 o'clock. And here we are Thursday. Goodness gracious, it'll be here before you know it. Ooh, how do you feel about Alabama taking on Georgia in the SEC Championship game? You can let us know at Joe Gaither 6 for all your social media needs, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Snapchat, Instagram, Joe Gaither 6 for all your social media needs. You can subscribe, rate, and review the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and on Amazon. You can watch us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter right there at Joe Gaither 6. We're a proud part of the BamaCentral Broadcasting Network. I am Joe Gaither, and this was another edition of the Joe Gaither Show on BamaCentral and BamaCentral.com.